Peace, everybody. Yeah. Peace. So, just wanted to go live for a bit and just share some thoughts. Um, Give y'all a moment to tune in. So, check this out, right? I remember years ago, that I got to a certain place in my journey, and you know how people say it's always something, and life has ups and downs, and so I got to a certain point in my life, and this is years ago, where I was doing things consistently, and things were happening which surprised me because they had such a level of synchronicity and perfection that it surprised me. Like, wow, this worked out perfectly. And things began to happen for me in that space of perfection that, nah, this ain't no green tea. This ain't no green tea, G. Um, so things were happening for me in such a space of perfection that it was surprising because I thought, like, man, this was my first thought, right? Things can't happen this perfect all the time, because again, I was conditioned just like everybody else to think that life has ups and downs and things happen, this, that, and the third. And so it surprised me. So imagine the most beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky, perfect weather. And you looking up at the sky and you thinking it's only a matter of time for the storm clouds to roll in. Visualize that. A perfect day, perfect weather, not a cloud in the sky. And you're looking up at the sky and you think to yourself, it's only a matter of time before the storm clouds roll in. That was my experience years ago. And imagine waiting there with that thought in your mind that eventually the storm clouds will roll in, meaning something is eventually going to happen. Things can't be this perfect. And you're sitting there waiting and you're waiting, you're waiting, you're waiting. And this shit happens for years, years, where you do not see any storm clouds roll in. You don't see anything that disrupts what it is that you're actually doing. Nothing happens. And eventually I find myself in this realm, this space where it's like, yo, what is this? Like, what is this? Where everything that I do, everything that I say manifests with zero doubt or disruption. And I got to a certain space in my life where I realized things that religions strive to teach people. We have a lot of new age metaphysicians that strive to teach people things about the law of attraction and causation and manifestation and all this other stuff. I know that shit on a level that when I see people speaking about it, I can tell you in terms of specificity whether or not they know what this realm or this space actually is. As parents and as guardians, and I don't care how many videos you've watched. I have like fucking over 800 videos on my YouTube page. Not because I'm constantly trying to create videos. It's just if I have a thought or an idea and I want to share something that people can use right now and apply it to their life, I share that shit. So I'm not ambulance chasing. You know, like a lot of people nowadays are in this craze to create content. I don't do that shit. If I got something that I want to share or say, maybe the best medium to share that thought or idea is an article. So I'll write an article. Maybe the best medium to share that idea is animation. So I will share an animation. Maybe it maybe it's creative. Maybe it needs to be in the form of a poem or a song or something that I produce. Maybe it requires an entire book. Maybe it's just a tweet or a Facebook post or whatever, right? So when I'm inspired to share something, I share it. And regardless of anything that you've ever books you've read or whatever, this is the essence of why I created the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. This is what I'm going to share with you. And this is what you have to understand. As a parent, as a guardian, as an adult, in proximity to children, the greatest relationship that you can have with children is social emotional. Social emotional. not just teaching them how to say the alphabet or numbers, and they're going to learn that. The social emotional is an investment in their sense of self and identity. It builds self esteem and self confidence. Now, sometimes I share quite a bit, like my eldest two queens and then my youngest queen, Anusha. If you pay attention to what I share, you can see their self confidence and self esteem. Now, it's challenging being classified as people of color or Black people or a marginalized segment of this American population growing up in this wilderness of North America. It's challenging, meaning no matter how much self esteem or self confidence that you have, you're constantly going to face attacks on that identity because the society around you doesn't necessarily reflect your worldview. So, part of that self esteem and self confidence is building the immunity to withstand the attacks on your identity. Now, self esteem and self confidence is directly linked to the infinite potential of who you essentially are. Self esteem and confidence are directly linked to the infinite potential of who and what you are. So, as an early childhood educator, one of the things that I did not allow in my classroom is the word can't. All of my preschoolers, if they were talking and they just say, I can't do this, I would stop them and I would say, we don't use the word can't in this room. Instead, we use I have not learned yet. Why is that important? Because when you say can't, then you limit the infinite potential and the essence of who you are. So when you say can't, it's not possible. So you just interrupted or disrupted your infinite potential to accomplish anything. So instead, I constantly encourage them, don't use the word can't. Use the phrase, I have not learned yet. So if they get to a certain situation or circumstance where they don't have the experience, the way that they assess that situation is not I can't, but I have not learned yet, which means you identify and recognize the infinite potential of who and what you essentially are and the capacity to be able to meet that challenge in the future. That is vitally important in terms of the way in which you process life. Is vitally important. And that's all social emotional. Usually, an early childhood educator, they may not be telling children that. They teaching them how to count sequentially or identify certain letters in the alphabet. That's important. But in terms of identifying that greater is that or the that is within you, then this form that is within this world is the premise in terms of your trajectory in life. That is vital to understand. It's vital because if you don't recognize that you are an infinite being within this physical form, subjected to time and timelines and a linear existence, if you don't recognize that you are the consciousness within the form, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to obtain certain degrees or levels of success in this society. Because what are you going to draw from? You're going to base your abilities on what you can physically or not physically do, when that is not the greater aspect of who and what you are, essentially, the essence of who you are. So let me go back to what I said initially, right? You look at my eldest two queens and my youngest queen and things that I share about them, yo, they know that the essence of them is infinite. They know that. That sense of self esteem and confidence is one of the things that propel them to achieve great accomplishments. When you see my 2-year old, you can see that there is no doubt in her mind. You can see that. All children are born or incarnated with that degree of consciousness. And I say incarnated with that degree of consciousness because they are infinite potential within the form. When they're physically born, that is their physical birth date. But the mind or the consciousness or the intangible intelligence that is conducted through the brain has no said birth record. So those of you who are Christians, it's right in the Bible. It's right in the Bible that you're made in the image and the likeness of God. That's what your Bible tells you. But a lot of Christians don't aspire to or strive to be Christ-like because they think it's unattainable. When Christ himself told you that even you will be able to do greater works than me. But people don't believe it. Why they don't believe it is because they never learn to identify with the creator or the consciousness, the infinite potential that is the essence of who and what they are. Everything else are just attributes of who you are. You may be a nurse, that's an attribute. Your name, that's an attribute. You were who you are before your parents or guardians named you. You were who you are. Before you had your profession, you were who you are. Before you were even defined as a gender, you were who you were. Right? So most people don't identify with the essence of who they are. They identify with all of these attributes. And it's cool to recognize and to respect those different attributes because that is a part of who you are. But who you were who you were before you were a nurse, before you were a man, before you were who and whatever it is that you define yourself to be. You were that consciousness before the form. Even if you look at it in terms of gases, liquids, and solids, your parents took you from a gas into a liquid, and eventually you became solid. I'm talking about identifying with the gas, the consciousness. Yes. Yo, power born. Yo, Yeah, absence. Yeah, you got to do the knowledge on absence. That's what it is. So yeah, so my queens, any youth that I come in contact with, not just my queens, I constantly speak to the infinite potential. I don't accept nothing mediocre. If they talk about, oh, I can't do this, yo, I interrupt that right then and there. No, 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 no. You just have not learned yet. You haven't learned yet. That's what you accept about your infinite potential, right? So in terms of like the social emotional component, that is what's vitally important in terms of early childhood development. Because peep this, when a child is incarnated in the form up until 6 years of age, 95% of the brain is fully developed. 95% of the brain is fully developed. So you can literally see the capacity of a determined idea by the time a child reaches kindergarten. And why is it called kindergarten? Because it's a garden. It's a garden. It's where you start seeing ideas being rooted. So, as parents and guardians, the most critical part of your child's growth and development is in those formative years. Form, because you're helping form a determined idea. So, the brain, 95% developed, that aspect of their cognitive development. The brain eventually goes through a process called synaptic pruning, which essentially means the synapses that the child is thinking gets pruned in order for the brain to function more efficiently. So anything that you share at that point in that child's growth and development, anything that you expose that child to in that process of growth and development becomes their brain structure. Their brain structure. So between the form being incarnated or birth to 6 years old, it's about exposure. It's about consistency because this is literally becoming their brain architecture. You're constructing their brain architecture. All right. Yo, so I got a question. It says, can you share some of the specific methods that you use to deal with short attention spans when you're teaching preschool? So, my question would be, what do you mean by short attention spans? Right? because it could be you are on some jazz music type shit and the children are on some trap music shit. Your tempo is totally different from there. So what you may call short attention span may mean, and it's possible, that your tempo is a little bit slower and your expectations may be a little bit slower than the tempo and the expectations of your children. So, in other words, there are many times where I'm teaching preschool class and I have a plan and I have, okay, expectations. Yo, I'm going to do this today, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. And my students come in class and they be on some shit like, nah, we ain't doing that today. They be on, like Taj is saying, they be on a entirely different vibration of frequency, totally different, which means I have to adapt. I have to adapt. So that's something which we have to make sure we analyze our own perspective in terms of how we're assessing the situation. You know, 3-year old here, and it's hard to get her to remember the number she just said. Okay. Well, see, you're talking about memory with a 3-year old. A 3-year old doesn't really develop memory in that capacity until they get a little older. So your expectations may be a little bit unreasonable. So I wouldn't beat myself up on whether she will remember a number or something. One thing that you will notice though is I bet you that 3-year old can remember a rhyme or something that she's watching on maybe YouTube in terms of like Coco Melon or some of those other different programs that they have because they understand that in terms of memory, rhythm is uniquely connected to memory. So if you can create something that has a certain rhythm to it, she'll easily remember that. She'll easily remember that. True indeed. Flashcards is good too. Rhythm, absolutely. Because you play something on television or YouTube or whatever, and you see that it has a certain rhyme or rhythm. So my animation with the supreme mathematics that I created. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, power, equality. God build or destroy, born cipher, back to me. That has a rhythm to it. Children remember that. Children remember that. Okay. Yeah. I understand. So the fact that halftime that you're present and you're consistent, that is the best that you could do because you can't control what anybody else does. You know, as a protector and as a provider, you can create the environment that is conducive to your child's growth and development. But once they step outside of that environment, you don't have any control of that. So let me give you an example. My eldest two queens, I always strive to create an environment that encourages critical thinking, to be able to do the knowledge and figure out things on their own. Because when a person has the capacity to critically think and to analyze things for themselves, they also have the capacity to figure out things and to solve problems on their own. A lot of people are not encouraged to be critical thinkers. They're encouraged to be believers and followers and That works for people who are in control. But when you encourage people to develop the capacity to think for themselves, to be critical thinkers, to figure things out and to solve things, and to not just go along with things, that quality or characteristic is something that is vital and important in any sphere of endeavor that they go into. So they're going to do the knowledge, regardless to whom or what. It doesn't matter what they're involved in. They're going to think for themselves. Most people are not taught to think for themselves. They're taught to be followers. They're taught to be believers. And that is what upholds the status quo of people who are encouraging that. Nah, halftime. What I'm talking about is really you plant a seed, you water the seed, it grows into a plant under the most intense circumstances. Think about a seed being planted in total darkness and all of the soil that it has to move by itself in order to seek the sun and then depend upon the climate or the conditions in order for it to grow. When we share knowledge with people, that is a process. God, the situation you described earlier about the things going in accord to perfection, how did it feel when it kept occurring in your life? Peace, Malik. It was surprising at first, but then I realized that I opened the door and gained access to a reality of purpose that is the goal of every human being. And that is what I do. I strive to show people how to discover their purpose. So when I opened that door, Malik, I realized, and it gave me access to a lot of things that people don't want others to have access to, and that some people lie about. Peace, Malik. And let me tell you this. Do you know how many millionaires that do you know how many people that I've advised who have become millionaires? How many people that I've given advice to who have become millionaires? And me, I don't give a fuck about money. The path that I live and my purpose, I've been immortalized already. I cannot die. None of you will allow me to die, even if this physical form is not here anymore. I will never die through all of you. So there's certain keys in life that I've learned to unlock specific realities that People try to sell you. People try to manipulate you into following, and no, I there's things that I know that I strive to share with all of you that that will enable you to see the essence of who you are. Because I know that I've immortalized the things that I do. I don't live in fear. I don't. Now, I'll tell you this. At one point in my life, I was uh I was I was worried that I didn't do enough, where if I physically physically died, that my queens, my daughters, would not have enough experience with me where they would know who I was. And that was concerning to me. I thought about that a lot. And I've lived to the extent now where I have two older queens. And even if I die tomorrow physically, they know enough about me and the impact that I've made within this world that they will be able to share it with Anusha. So, one thing I say all of the time is that you can't fake confidence. You can't fake intentionality. You can't fake that. You can't fake genuineness or someone that's speaking from the heart. You can't. You can't compete with that. And that's one thing too that some people, they here's one of the issues, right? Some of y'all get on social media and you're looking at all of the things that people are doing, and people putting on their best face and all of the things that they have going for them and accomplishments or whatever, and you may feel as if you're deficient in certain areas and that you're not as accomplished and progressive and all of this other stuff, right? Your purpose in life is not a question of competition. Your purpose in life is not a question of competition. No one can compete with me. You can't do what I do. I realize what I was born to do and I'm doing it. There's no competition there. It's impossible because if people could do what I do, they would do it. They don't. There's no competition. The same thing applies to all of you. No one can do what you have a purpose to do. Okay. So, how do you find your purpose? One of the indicators of your purpose is something that you do naturally that you would do regardless to whom or what. It doesn't have nothing to do with money. It doesn't have nothing to do with whether people like it or not. You're going to do it regardless. And It's positive and productive and something that contributes to the human family and makes this world a better place than what you first arrived here. What do I mean by that? All of us were incarnated as consciousness in the form, or we were born into this world when the world was in a certain state. There was certain music that was popular, certain fashion, certain things that were going on a world scale. When you were incarnated as consciousness or born into this world, you were born into this world to do something to make this world a better place. What can you contribute to humanity? What can you contribute to this earth? What could you do? It ain't about how much money you can make. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. It's not, no. That's not what your purpose is, how much money you can make. If you make money from your purpose, that is the result of your purpose. That's the result of your purpose. I'm going to be transparent, more even more transparent with y'all, right? I do speaking engagements in different places, and the majority of the time, when whatever amount they pay me to do a speaking engagement and to share, whether I'm speaking about this or early childhood development or the Underground Railroad or whatever, the majority of the time, whatever I'm paid for that shit, I either donate it or I support some type of initiative or support someone that's doing something else. I don't take that shit and buy no fucking Jordans or buy a fucking car or some shit like that. I don't do shit like that. I don't do shit like that. I think, yo, what could I use this for to help others continue what it is that I envision in terms of bringing more beauty to this world? Do I spend, I get a G for speaking for, and this is just an example, for 20 minutes. Give me a G for speaking for 20 minutes for this subject. I'm not taking a fucking G and buying no Gucci shit. I ain't taking no G and going to no fucking strip club and get the fuck out of here. No, I'm taking a G and saying, yo, I see this young woman that has this business or she has this whatever, I'm going to support her. Here. That's yours. Or I see that this person is striving to do this event or this project or this initiative that I agree with. Here. That's what I do. That's what I do. And that is why the consistent opportunities or the things that, like I mentioned earlier, about looking up at the sky and wondering when the storm clouds are going to roll in, that's why the storm clouds don't roll in. Some of y'all are scared. And that's what it comes down to. Some of y'all are scared. And peep this. Those of you who are in the church, those of y'all that's in the church, and you hear from your pastor about how God will bless you when you sacrifice and this, that, and the third. There's a lot of truth in that outside of the context of the church and the religion and the hierarchy and all of this other stuff. when you are very intentional about the things that you are striving to support, which represents the extension of a legacy, of an idea, of growth and development, whatever you invest in will outlive you. And like what Taj said, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. What you put into something will ultimately have an outcome. And it requires a lot of trust to do that. You know, there's been times where I may have to pay rent. And I'm like, nah, this brother or this sister or this initiative requires that. And I will take my rent and say, this is for you. Not because I'm expecting something in return, but because I've lived and experienced it for so long where I realize how you reap what you sow. Yo, that's a good question. What keeps a person in that mind frame? Discipline and connectedness to those who understand exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about right now, I'm not talking about doubt. Some of y'all that's listening to what I'm saying and you have ways to retort what I'm saying, like, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. I don't fuck with people who have those type of mindsets. So in addition to your own discipline and commitment and consistency to what I'm talking about, of knowing what your infinite potential is and not having any doubt, you have to be connected to those who reinforce that recognition of your infinite potential. Exactly. Yo, y'all, I see what y'all saying. Yo, y'all know I have the ability to bring people in, right? Yo, let me know if damn, you know what? Look, check this out. Check this out. I think I could do this right here. Ah, hell yeah, doubt is a mind killer. Ah, let me see what I can do. Um, hmm. Yeah. So you live in such a way where you know that you have to be present. So, for example, the 14th letter in our alphabet is N, and that represents now, nation, or N. Now represents being present. And one of the greatest expressions of our nationality is being present right now, being present, being in the moment. Think about how many times you may be in a situation and you're not really there. You're thinking about some shit that happened in the past or you're thinking about the future. You're not really there. The flaw in that is you never really know when no one's going to be physically there anymore. I may not be here after this. I may not be here after this, right? So, how would you feel if you weren't present right now? Or people that you're in contact with every day, when you had the opportunity to tell them that you love them or you're proud of them and you appreciate them, but yet you kind of like, well, it ain't really important to let them know that. What if that person wasn't there the next day? How would you feel? You would feel regret. Why would you feel regret? Because you weren't present right there. You weren't present. You didn't say what was necessary at that moment without feeling as if, yo, I don't know how they can respond. I don't know how they gonna take it. And I don't really want to look like this, that, and the third, blah, blah. No, 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 no. Let me tell y'all something. February 20th, I got a phone call at around 11 in the morning that my father passed. And I wasn't expecting that. And I didn't feel regret, but it hurt when I knew that someone would no longer be physically, they won't be physically there anymore, right? So I went to his home and I met the coroner there. And I saw his form, him laying in the bed. And I had a chance to see how he left, right? And up until that point, my old dad's health was deteriorating, right? He was in the hospital at a certain amount of time. And then he eventually made it out of the hospital. And I was very intentional about being present when I was with him. I wasn't around him and I was on my phone or thinking about other different things in the past or the present, or no, I was there and I was present, right? So when he passed physically, I didn't feel any regrets in terms of, oh man, I should have told him this, I should have told him that. And no, because every time when we departed, I told him I loved him and I looked him in the eyes, and that's how we departed. I was present and I was intentional. So I never felt any regrets in terms of how he left physically, right? A few hours later, I get a phone call that my brother was shot and he died on the same day. So I had to go and I meet my older brother at the scene of the crime, and we had to identify his body, right? He left in a very different way on the same day as my old dad. But even though he left that way, I was also present in terms of being intentional with our relationship and how we were with each other. Every time we left each other, I would tell him that I love him. And when we were with each other, it was never I'm thinking about something else that's going on around us, or talking about stuff that's going on around us, or thinking about the past or the future. I was present. So even though all of that shit was mad traumatic, like you would never expect some shit like that to happen, right? I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel, oh man, I should have told my brother that I loved him. Oh man, I should have told my father that I loved him. Oh man, I never had, because we didn't we didn't operate that way. We always told each other that we loved each other. We were always present. So I never felt that type of burden of regret. Now, what I do feel now at this point is, even though they're not physically here, I would want to know what their input is on certain things that are going on presently. What would they think about this? What would they think about that? I would ask them about this. I would ask them about that. And that's something that just naturally comes along with the fact, when a person is not physically here anymore, there are questions that you want to ask them now that you might not have thought about when they were here. That's natural. That comes along with anybody that physically loses somebody, right? But in terms of like regret, no. So I'm saying this to say, while people are here now, don't worry about whether or not they reciprocate what it is that you have to say, whether or not they understand what it is that you have to say. If you really feel like, I want to tell this person that I love them, tell them. It's not based upon whether or not they can reciprocate it or not, or what you can get out of it. You're doing all that you have and giving all within your power. And that is important. That is important. Because when you live that way, you're fully expressing the infinite potential of who and what you are. That's how I live. If I know someone and I say I love you, I'm not saying that because I want you to say some shit back. I'm telling you because that is what I want to share with you. I'm not expecting anything back. That's what I'm saying. You live with the level of intentionality that will not burden you with regret if anybody is no longer here. If you want to tell somebody you're proud of them, it doesn't matter how they process that or if they reciprocate it or not. You feel proud, tell them. Tell them. Tell them. And when you live with that sense of intentionality and courage, because a lot of times people live in such a way where they're always striving to live in this transactional space. I say this and I do this and I expect this in return. In some realms that is important, like if you're on your job, you want to make sure that if you're working a job, that people are compensating you in an equitable way. That's important and stuff like that. But when you're dealing with like family and friends, you share that is what abundance is. I live abundantly. I live abundantly. I share and I give, Not worried about whether or not somebody's going to give me something back or no, 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 no. Because if you really recognize that your infinite potential, if you really understand that, then the possibility of depletion of infinite potential cannot exist. If you really understand that your infinite potential, if you really, I don't care what religion that you are a part of, if you really think that you got a relationship with God, and I'm talking about Christians, if you really think you got a relationship with God and this, that, and the third, then if you're that connected, there is no possibility of a depletion of your joy or your infinite potential or your godliness. That it cannot exist. It's impossible. Because if you think otherwise, then you are in a contradiction to what it is that you say that you think or believe. I freely give. I freely love. I don't expect anything in return because it is through my purpose that I have been immortalized. I can't die. Most of y'all fear death. Most of y'all actually think that you're physically going to die. When I got to a point where I realized, like, yo, I cannot die. I'm going to be here forever. When I say me, I'm talking about the consciousness that has been expressed and interpreted through this form of Saladin. This is the attribute of expression. That's all that it is. And I will be here forever. All of you are like that. True indeed, Malik. You can't die. Even if you're looking at things on a physiological level or physical level, matter is neither created nor destroyed. This is matter. Now, the key is to live a life that matters so that it aligns with the matter. Those of you that have children, that are parents and guardians, listen to this. Live the type of life where your children can live a life just simply telling the stories about who and what you are. I'm going to repeat that. If you have children, live the type of life where your children can live a life just telling the stories about who and what you are. That's purposeful living. So, peace.